They built giant pyramids in the desert, painted their gods in blood, and then vanished without a word. On the north coast of Peru, where the Andes cast a dark shadow over a bone-dry plain, a people rose from dust and dared the desert to feed them. Around 100 CE, the Moche cut canals into earth that had not seen rains for months, channeled rivers through handmade veins, and turned dead valleys into fields of green. They did not write books, they wrote in bricks. Millions of sun-baked blocks stacked into sacred mountains called Huacas. Temples so large they swallowed the skyline. Step inside Huaca de la Luna and the walls are still alive. Red, blue, yellow figures stare back. Warriors, spiders, serpents, and a god with a fanged jaw and watching eyes. Priests dressed in feathered caps and metal crowns walk these painted corridors with measured steps. The scene on the walls were not for decoration, they were destiny. What the murals showed, the people performed. On festival days, drums rolled like thunder across courtyards. Processions moved between the pyramids. Warriors with copper blades and bright nose ornaments returned from the battle carrying prisoners. The crowd watched in tense silence as the priest prepared the ritual. Blood flowed in golden cups lifted towards the sky and offered to a god who demanded balance in a hostile land. To the Moche, this was not a chaos. This was the order. The desert was a bargain. The sacrifice was the price of rain. They left no written words to explain themselves, yet their voices survived in clay. Moche potters shaped truth into vessels. Face of kings and commoners, athletes and artisans, healers and hunters. They modeled sea lion and owls, jaguars and bats, reed boats and nets heavy with fish. They carved entire ceremonies in miniature. The warrior's capture, the priest's cup, the procession of the dead. Their art was so precise that it feels like a camera left running in another age. For centuries, the system held. Canals carried river water through miles of desert. Storehouse filled with maize and beans. Metal workers smelted copper and gilded it with gold. Weavers pulled colors from plants and sand and dressed their leaders in fabric that caught the sun. The pyramid rose in layers, one era built over another, each generation laying its faith literally on the top of the last. Then the sky changed its mind. Around the 6th to 7th century CE, the Pacific turned violent. El Nino struck with sheets of rain that became floods, tore fields from their roots and buried neighborhoods under mud. When the storm ended, the land flipped to their extreme. Drought split canals and starved the soil. The same heavens that blessed the rituals now mocked them. The rituals still promised balance, but the rivers refused to listen. Temples that once felt immortal were patched, rebuilt and patched again. Cracks spread through walls and faith alike. The Moche did not fall in a single night. They endured, adapted and tried again. They rebuilt their canals. They offered more. They waited for ancient rhythm to return. When it did not, the order they believed in began to unravel. Rival centers rose and pulled away. The old festival grew tense. The gods grew silent. By around 700 CE, the great courts emptied. The pyramids stood sacred, and the people who had turned desert into life faded into memory. All that remained were the bricks, the murals and the clay. And in those, a question still cuts deep. How does a civilization so skilled, so fierce and so sure of its gods lose the world it built with its own hands? This is the rise and fall of Moche, a people who mastered water in a land without rain and tied their fate to their gods. and who left behind a map of their heart in paint and clay. Today, the pyramids still hold their breath, and the desert still keeps their secrets. So, are you ready to listen? North Peru is hard teacher. Months can pass with no rain. The wind lifts sands like knives. Rivers run narrow between the Andes and the sea, then vanish into the desert. This is where the Moche choose to live and rise. They did not wait for mercy from the sky. Around 100 to 200 CE, they cut canals from the Moche and Chimama rivers, carrying miles of trenches that carried water across dead grounds. Fields spread like green fans into the valleys. Maize, beans, squash, cotton, and chili. They turned drought into yields. Irrigation was not a trick here, it was a system. Engineers measuring gradients, crew clearing silts, overseers timing gates so one field drank while other rested. When you master water, you master life. The cities rose behind those lifelines. The most famous pairs, Huaca del Sol and Huaca de la Luna, the temple of the sun and the temple of the moon, facing each other across a wide plaza near today's Trujillo. These were not the small shrines. They were man-made mountains of adobe built in stacked phase over centuries. Each mud brick bears thumbed marks, the stamped sign of work gangs and lineages. A roll call pressed into clay, Huaca del Sol, partly destroyed by Spanish-cut canals, once towered in steppy platforms. Huaca de la Luna kept its painted walls, red, yellow and black, gods still watching even after 1,500 years. When a ruler died or an era turned, they sealed old walls and raised new platforms on top. The city climbed upwards, old rituals entombed, newer ones lifted closer to the sun. Streets bent towards plazas, plazas focused on ramp and courts. Courts faced the hookahs like eyes. You can read powers in the ground plan. Who ran this world? A tight circle of warriors, priests and nobles, whose authority came from control of water, war and warships. Below them stood specialists, engineers, brickmakers, metalworkers, weavers, potters, fishermen and farmers. On the coast, red boats, cablitos de totora, skimmed the surface to the net anchovy and sardine. Inland, herders kept camelids for wools and burden. Markets moved goods between valleys. Diplomacy and grading did the same when markets failed. Their craft was a second language. Metalworkers smelted copper and alloyed it with arsenic or tin for harder blades. They gilded copper to shine like gold and silvered it to catch moonlight. Weavers drew deep colors from plants and muds, wrapping elites in cotton so fine it felt like a breath. Potters shaped the signature stirrup spout vessels, clean forms with a single loop handle and a spout that poured like a controlled river. On those vessels and on fine press modeled reliefs, they recorded the world. Nets heavy with fish, hunts in desert scrub, counters under banners and rituals that stitched myth to law. Trade carried their name beyond the valley. Shells from warm northern waters, obsidian from the highlands, and bright pigments moved along coastal and inland. In return, Moche goods traveled out. Textiles, metal ornaments, fine ceramic. You did not need a written script to know who you were dealing with. You can see it in the style. Sharp nose, almond eyes, tight helmet, crescent ear spools, the curve of a syrup spout that every potter learned by heart. Archaeology gives us faces. In a valley at Sipang, tombs held a Moche lord buried with gold, copper and nose ornaments, layered pectoral plates, owl warrior emblems, gods, wives and llamas. The whole order of this world arranged in earth. These were not myth, these were positions in a living hierarchy, set for a journey and beyond. Through all of this ran the same thread: control the river, honor the god, protect the surplus. The Moche learned the beat of the Pacific winds and the moods of the Andes. They read the first rise of floodwater, and the first taste of salt in soil. They made calendars from the cloud and currents, duty from danger. By 300 to 500 CE, their major centers like Moche, Santa, and others were strong, their temples layered high, their workshops humming, their fields steady. In a land that should have broken them, they built a civilization of precision, brick by brick, gate by gate, rule by rule. From a distance, you saw pyramids and desert. Up close, you saw a machine, human, sacred, and exact, built to keep the line between chaos and order from snapping. And for a long time, it absolutely worked like a charm. So if that's how the Moche fed their world, this is how they believed it, how art, ritual, and rule locked together so tightly that faith became a law. Step into Huaca de la Luna again. The paint still clings to the wall. Bands of red, yellow, white, and black, stacked like chapters. The same faces repeat, a fanged being with staring eyes, spider waves, serpent bodies, owl talons, warriors in tight helmets. The Moche called on a Fantian, we now nickname after their looks, the Decapitator. With fangs and blade, spider and serpent powers tied to rain, rivers, and the sea. In this desert where water decides life, blood become stand-in for rain. Offer the one, hope for the other. Their art is a second archive on stirrup spout vessels and fine molded cups. Scenes repeat like a liturgy. Ritual combat, captive striped and bound. Priest in towering headdresses, receiving cups filled with victims' blood. The famous sacrifice ceremony. It appears on pottery, on wall paintings, even in metal plaques. For decades, it looked like myth, until archaeologists started finding bones beneath the plaza and cut marks on neck vertebrae that matched the pictures. The art was not fantasy, it was record. Ritual began with war, but not the kind meant to erase the neighborhood from the map. Warriors made informal combat, took high-status captives, and brought them back in processions that echo across the room of the Huaca. Priest and priestess gathered. Yes, women held high ritual office as well. At San Jose de Moro, tombs of elite priestess were found, buried with crowns, goblets, and regalia shown in the very scenes painted on ceramics. On Peru's north coast, power did not speak with one voice. It spoke in ranks: war chief, ritual chief, priestess lord, each with costumes, masks, and duties the people would recognize at a glance. Metal turned belief into shine. Moche smiths smelted copper, then gilded it with skin of gold, or silvered it to catch the moonlight. Nose ornaments like crescent moons, breastplates that covered a chest like scales, helmets with all wings or fanged visors. In the royal tombs of Sipan, a ruler lay with layered armor of copper gold, a staff bannered and offerings, godded at his feet, gods at his feet, lama beside him, retrains in orders ranks. It is a social pyramid buried whole. The warrior priest shown in art, he of the tall headdress and staff, has a body in the ground. Ceremony touched every craft. Weavers dressed elites in cotton dyed deep reds and ochres. Feather workers set iridescence on caps and fans. Potters shaped portraits so exact we can see scars, wrinkles, and crooked nose faces of real people, not cartoons. Painters rehearse the same scene again and again, fixing the rules of ritual in color. Even medicine shows up. Vessels depict transportation, healers, and bandaging. Proof that same hands took the life could also try to save it. There is a darker layer, sign of hallucinogens, most likely San Pedro cactus. In ceremonial context, deer hunts that read as more than food runs, with antlers and dancers crossing into spirit worlds. Sea creatures mixed with land beings, as if to say the valley and this ocean are one story, not three. The Moche world is a braid: water, blood, crop, conquest, offerings, renewal. pulled tight so it will not fray. And this is the engine of rule. Art codifies rituals. Ritual is power. Power is labor. Labor is art. The loop is closed. A lord who builds canals can claim he pleases the gods. A priestess who pours the cup can claim she keeps the river faithful. A warrior who wins captives can claim he fuels the sky. People obey not only from fear but from cosmic logic. If the cycle stops, the desert wins. For a long stretch, from about 300 to 600 CE, the system holds. Temples are repainted, platforms raised, costumes renewed, tombs furnished, fields maintained. The same scene repeated because repetition is the point. Continuity is the safety in a land where one season can break you. But repetition had a hidden cost when the world outside the painting began to change. When the sky brings flood instead of balance, or drought instead of reward, the picture on the wall doesn't change as fast as the rivers do. And when ritual promises rain, and rain does not come, the faithful see a crack no brick can cover. The desert is a bargain. For centuries, the Moche paid it with labor, order, and blood. And the desert gave back grain, fish, copper, and calm. Then, without warning, the sky rewrote the contract. First came rain, not showers, but walls of water driven by warning sea. El Nino swelled the rivers until they burst their banks. Canals that once fed fields became knives that cut them apart. Mud tore downhills and buried whole neighborhood. At Huaca de la Luna, repair walls piled up in frantic layers. Fresh plaster over fresh damage, like bandage on a wound that would not close. Painted gods stared through drips and cracks. Priests repainted their faces and repeated the rites. The drum still rolled, but the ground answered with a sucking sound. Then the sky snapped the other way. Rivers shrank to strings of brackish pools. Silt clogged the gates. Salt crept into soils. Fish runs thinned. Fields went yellow. Farmers walked further to find water that didn't taste like the sea. Engineers measured gradients and found none left to spend. The same heaven that once blessed the rituals now tested them with fire and dust. Faith did not break in a day. Rituals grew more urgent, processions more intense. Captives still marched. Priests still lifted cups. Banners still fluttered. But the feeling changed from steady cycle to desperate plea. In some valleys, builders raised defensive walls around settlements that had never needed them. Storage jars were hidden, doorways narrowed, courtyards turned into redoubts. Where once the Huaca anchored everything, now every household learned to brace. Archaeology shows the whiplash. At Huaca del Sol, flood deposits like thick page between phase of rebuilding. At Pampa Grande, a great center rises late and fast, but then empties just as quickly, as if the plan outran the weather. At San Jose de Moro, elite burials continues. Priestess laid out with crowns and cups, but the layers tighten. The offerings shift and the message turns Solomon, holy pattern even as the world slides. The social fabric began to tear along old seams. Rival valleys like Moche, Chichama, Viru, Santa, that once traded and copied each other's style, started to drift apart. Local lords leaned harder on their people. More labor for canal dredging, more tribute for repairs, more bodies for the stairways. When the harvest failed, raiding replaced markets. When raiding failed, fight followed. Families packing tools and ritual bundles, moving up valley to newer fields, or down the coast towards any place that rivers still listened. And in the court of the Huacas, a harder question entered the room. Uninvited, if the rites were true, why did the rivers refuse them? The murals still promised balance. The sacrifice ceremony still tied war to rain. But the sky kept breaking its end of the deal. Some doubled down, some quickly adapted. Some look for new gods with new answers. You can see it in the art of the late period. Motifs shift. Costumes change, old symbols blur into new ones. Community phrase. By the late 600s CE, the silence grows. Workshops go still. Courtyards empty. Repair stops. The great huacas stand, but their stairways hold more wind than feet. What began as a climate swing becomes a confident collapse of civilization built on precision, on exact water, exact rhythms, exact order. Faces a world it can no longer predict, and the whole machine shudders. The Moche did not vanish in a single storm. They eroded, valley by valley, buried, and the map of their own world looked less like an empire and more like an island after a flood. And in the space between those islands, something else, new leaders, new centers, new blends of belief began to rise. Collapse did not leave a crater, it left footsteps. As floods and drought broke the old rhythm, the great Moche centers thinned. Workshop went quiet, plazas echoed, and families slipped away at dawn with baskets, tools, and small bundles of sacred things. Pampa Grande rose fast as hopeful fix, and emptied just as fast when the rains and politics refused to settle. Huaca del Sol and Huaca de la Luna stood like sacred mountains, their stairways holding more wind than prayer. But people did not vanish. They moved. Up valley and down coast, new leaders gathered, the broken thread, the Lambaya culture rising by the late 700s and 800s CE. You can still feel Moche hands at work. The pyramids at Batan Grande and later Tucan climbed the sky in adobe steps, gold masked with wide eyes, and crescent tumi knives gleam from elite tombs. Metallurgy grows even bolder. Gilded copper, arsenical bronze, layered ornaments that flash like fire. The old Moche grammar, power in metal, rank in regalia, faith in spectacle. Survivors translated into new dialect. Further south and later, the Chimu rise Chanchan, a wall sea of dust-colored palaces near modern Trujillo. Their walls carry wave motifs and sea birds. Their canals received old curses. Their workshop swell with the same skills, casting, embossing, weaving, refined to an imperial scale. The Mocha, loop, art, ritual, power, labor is not dead. It has migrated. Even in the highlands and inland valleys, echoes remain. The warring world spreads administrative style and road logic. Coastal communities adjust their crops and timing to strange seasons. New cult shares space with old household shrines. Engrave goods across centuries, you can trace a through line. Stir up echoes in vessel shapes, feeling fangs in god masks, owl wings and crescent blades repeating like a heartbeat in a metal and clay. A civilization stopped being one name, but its habit kept living under others. This is the quiet truth of the Mocha end. It was not a fall into nothing. It was a breaking and branching. Valleys that once matched each other's mural now tells separate stories. Some paint new gods, some double down on the old. Some build bigger dams, some move closer to the sea and trust the nets. When the center could no longer hold, the edges learned to lead. Archaeology reads the record like weathered pages. Repair walls stacked at Huaca de la Luna. Flood layers like thick scars. Fortifications where plazas once welcomed crowns. Late priest's tomb at San Jose de Moro, still rich, still precise, insisting on order while the world tilts. The message is clear. People carried what they could: technique, memory, ritual, rules, irrigation maps into the next chapter. So the Mocha did not simply disappear. They changed their addresses. Their tools and vision walked forward in Lambaya courts, Chimu palaces, in village fields where canals get still clicked under careful hands. The desert remained the same hard teacher. New students held the same chalk. And the lesson: balance water, honor order, fear the sky, continued line by line into another age. The Mocha did not leave books. They left evidence. Bricks remember the hands. Murals remember vows. And clay that remembers faces. In a land where rain could betray you, they built a system to keep chaos out. Master the river, honor the god, protect the surplus. For centuries it worked. Then the sky changed and the contract broke. Their story is not just about sacrifice or shock. It is about balance, how a society tries to hold a line in between nature and need, belief and power, hope and fear. The Moche tied their rules to rituals, their rituals to and their water to life. When the flood and drought came back to back, the loop strained, canals cracked, faith wavered, orders frayed. This is the warning they left us. Even the best engineering fails when the climate writes in a larger hand. Yet look closer and you see more than collapse. You see transmission. Skills walked forward. Metal workers in Lambaek hammered gold that still glows like sunrise. Chimu builders at Chanchan raised walls breathed the sea. Priestess in the late Moche tombs carried office with dignity. Proof that spiritual power was not only a men's robe. Farmers kept the irrigation math that turns one river into 100 fields. A name faded, but a toolkit survived. Their art, those stirrup, spout vessels and painted walls, remains one of the most honest archives the ancient world ever made. It shows real procedures, real ceremonies, real people with scars and crooked nose. It also shows us something harder, how a community believes in a system so deeply that it cannot easily rewrite itself when the world moves. This is not just a judgment, it is a human pattern. And we do it too. Build routines, crown them as truth, and only change when the ground insists. Archaeology keeps turning the pages. A lord at Sipang lying in armor of copper and gold. A priestess at San Jose de Moro, buried with the same cups she held in life. Repair walls stacked like prayers at Huaca de la Luna. Each find replaces rumor with details. Speculate with context. The Moche stepped out of caricature and became a neighbor, engineer, artist, farmer, healers. People who faced a hard coast and tried to make it sing. So what remains? A lesson in humility. Nature will always have the last word. A lesson in memory. Art can outlive languages. A lesson in continuity. When center fails, edges learn to lead. And a quiet comfort. Even when a civilization falls, its craft, faith and care can flow into the next one like water finding a new channel. Walk those pyramids at dusk and you feel it, the desert holding its breath, the murals breathing through the dust, the clay still warm with touch. The Moche are not here to explain themselves, but they left enough for us to understand and enough to ask better questions of our time. Thank you for stepping into the desert with me. If this story gave you a new way to see the past, like the video and subscribe for more cinematic history. And drop echoes in clay in the comments so I know you are here. Until next time, stay curious, stay respectful, and remember, greatness isn't only what you build, it's what your work teaches after you are gone. And I'll see you in the next one.